In 1988, Katsuhiro Otomo directed Akira, a landmark production in Japanese animation. 7 years later, he produced an anthology that pushed his creative boundaries even further, a 1995 science fiction project called Memories. Most science fiction features humanity fighting off alien invasions or rogue machines. Otomo's anthology takes a different approach. The dystopias in this film are entirely self-engineered. Humanity actively builds the very cages it gets trapped inside. This animated diagram maps out the progression of self-destruction. At the center, a single isolated node labeled the individual. This represents the micro-level of personal tragedy. Expanding outward, the map forms a mid-level network of institutions, and finally reaches a massive outer ring labeled society. This structure forms the architecture of escalation. Human flaws do not stay contained. They scale up from psychological traps to systemic failures, and ultimately to rigid ideological structures. Across all three stages, the driving force is the same. People attempt to control elements of life that should naturally be left to time. That exact impulse transforms our creations into inescapable prisons. The first segment, Magnetic Rose, begins with a deep space salvage crew aboard the spaceship Corona. They intercept a distress signal and trace it to a massive, decaying European opera house drifting silently through the vacuum of space. The screenplay was written by Satoshi Kon. Kon is a director and writer known for his psychological thrillers, like Perfect Blue. In this segment, he focuses entirely on blurring the line between physical reality and psychological illusion. Inside the opera house, the crew discovers that the ship's artificial intelligence has merged with the consciousness of Eva Friedel, a once famous opera singer. The artificial intelligence constantly projects Eva's memories, trapping the salvage crew in an endless cycle of her lingering guilt and grief over a lost lover. The infinite physical distance of deep space mirrors the vast isolation of the human psyche. The endless void amplifies Eva's loneliness and obsession, making her virtual world the only reality that matters. At this microscale, an individual willingly builds a prison out of nostalgia to avoid facing a painful reality. The segment illustrates how technology can preserve love in data form while actively destroying the living people who get caught in it. The second segment, Stink Bomb, shifts the tone entirely to dark comedy. We move away from psychological tragedy and step up to the mid-level scale, systemic error and institutional failure. We meet Nobuo Tanaka, a young pharmaceutical worker with a bad cold. Seeking relief, he accidentally swallows a prototype biological weapon, thinking it is cold medicine. His body instantly begins emitting a deadly gas. Nobuo remains blissfully unaware of his condition. Believing he just needs to deliver the remaining pills to Tokyo headquarters, he walks cheerfully down the road. Behind him, the gas he exhales quietly annihilates entire towns, killing everything in his vicinity. Meanwhile, military forces and government scientists scramble to contain the threat. Their response is slow, confused, and highly destructive. The institutions designed to protect the public completely lose control over a biological weapon they created. The catastrophe here does not stem from a grand, evil master plan. The mass destruction is driven by a single ordinary mistake, heavily compounded by the rigid, unthinking bureaucratic protocol of the people trying to stop it. We reach the macro scale in the final segment, Cannon Fodder. The setting is a completely gray industrial city where every building is mounted with artillery. From children to soldiers, every citizen's daily life serves the machinery of perpetual war. The story follows a young boy who dreams of becoming a high-ranking cannon officer, just like his father, who loads massive artillery shells every day. The boy's ambition highlights how heavily the city's ideology conditions and indoctrinates its citizens straight from birth. This animated diagram maps out the visual technique Otomo uses to capture this society, a continuous, unbroken timeline flowing from left to right. The camera never appears to cut. This continuous shot acts as a visual metaphor for the endless machinery of a militarized society. The citizens fire massive shells into the distance, but the targets are never shown. No one questions if the enemy nation even exists. The conflict is simply maintained because the act of firing the cannons keeps the population unified and controlled. When an entire society builds its structures, its education, and its daily routines around fighting a war, that war becomes its sole identity. In a system like that, the very concept of peace becomes impossible to achieve. Across these three stories, Memories maps out a complete spectrum of human entrapment. We see individuals locked within personal memory, institutions destroyed by a simple mistake, and entire populations ground down by societal mechanisms. Otomo presents a specific, unifying philosophy. Humans have an intense desire to control time and their environment. Whether it is preserving a lost lover, trying to engineer biology, or sustaining an endless war, that exact desire consistently turns our own creations into cages. By proving how much philosophical weight short-form animation could carry, this release heavily influenced the structure and tone of later animated anthologies, like The Animatrix and Love, Death, and Robots. Looking at the systems we interact with today, it leaves us with one question. Out of the three prisons shown in the film, nostalgia, protocol, or ideology, which one is our own society closest to building right now?